So one of the most common concerns that I get about project management interviews is that people just feel like they're not confident. People want to know, well, how do I go into it confidently? How do I know that I'm going to do good? Well, this is why I made this interview prep kit, is so that you can be prepared. I've included every single common question that you're probably going to be asked during your interview. I've even received this review where this person let me know that they got their job offer and this prep kit is what helped them to land that job. This is why I've created this, so that people have confidence going into their interviews. With preparation comes confidence. So if you are planning or preparing for a project management interview, make sure that you get the interview prep kit so that you can ace your interview. So you all really loved the video where I went through project management interview questions and answers, and then I've also had almost 100 people purchase my project management interview prep kit, but I'm also just glad that it was of value to you. So now consider this video a part 2 to that, because what I want to do is just talk about some red flags that you'll potentially see or notice during your project management interviews. So I'm going to share 5 major red flags that could potentially pop up during your project management interviews. Plus, I'm going to share some questions that you should ask just so that you can make sure you're getting the full picture of the job before accepting any job offers. So red flag number 1 is a vague project management structure or methodology. So imagine accepting a job and they give you a project, and then you quickly realize that the company has no framework or any processes in place to manage their projects. If that doesn't sound problematic to you, then just know that that is pure chaos, and that's not something that you want to get yourself into. During your interviews, if you have the opportunity to ask the hiring manager about how they manage their projects, what processes do they follow, and if they respond with a response like, we just kind of go with the flow, or we just kind of take things as they come, we figure it out as we go, just know that that's a red flag. And that's probably often code for, we don't really have a structure. We don't really like structures, right? If there is no structured methodology for you to follow, or at least that the company follows for their projects, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to manage projects effectively. Just know, as the project manager, as you begin to grow in your career, you're going to realize that things will be your fault even if you didn't really have control over it. So this is something that you want to spot in the beginning, is do they even have a structure or processes in place just to make sure that their projects are delivered successfully. So one place where this is common is with startups. If you have had the opportunity to work with a startup, you'll know that a lot of them don't really have a lot of structure in place, especially when it comes to how they manage their projects. Many of them figure it out as they go, just because one, they either have minimal resources to actually manage these projects, but then two, some of them even feel like having project management structures or some type of PMO is not really necessary, right? That it just kind of bogs things down. They don't really like a lot of meetings, which I don't think anyone really cares for a lot of meetings, but in general, they just feel like there's no benefit of actually having project management structures in place or frameworks in place. So if you do happen to come across a company that has this type of mentality, then just know that this is a huge red flag. A structured methodology isn't just about organizing work. It's about supporting the project manager and also making sure that the projects are delivered successfully. The second red flag would be unclear job responsibilities or reporting structure. Before you accept any job role, you should already have a good idea or a good picture of who it is that you're going to be reporting to and what your daily tasks or responsibilities are going to look like. Now, if the interviewer isn't really clear about this, or when you ask this, they're not really sure how to explain this, it could mean a couple of things. It could mean that they don't really know what they want, meaning they don't really know exactly what the project manager is going to be doing. Or it could mean that they potentially want that project manager to do a little bit of everything. I've been in a project management role before where it seemed like I kind of reported to multiple people, which caused a little bit of chaos. During the interview, it kind of seemed as if I'll be reporting to one person, but in reality, I was reporting to 3 people. And the reason why this became problematic is because I was running into situations to where I was dealing with competing priorities. I ran into a situation where one person's project was extremely critical and needed to be done yesterday, but then I had another person who also had another project that was extremely critical. Well, as one project manager supporting multiple projects, as you can see, that created a lot of chaos and was just not easy to manage. So make sure during your interviews, you have a clear understanding of who it is that you're going to be reporting to and what your daily or your main responsibilities will be. If they answer something vague, or if they're not even really sure at all and they're just going to say, we'll just kind of figure it out as you go, just know that this is a huge red flag and it could be problematic for you. All right, so red flag number 3 is high turnover or burnout culture. And this is a subtle but significant red flag. Now, Now, I doubt any company will really admit during the interviews that they have high turnover, but there's ways that you can spot this. So here are a couple of examples. One example will be if the employer talks about a fast-paced environment without much else, or if you sense that they're looking for someone who's flexible with their hours. These are usually indicators of burnout that could have happened with previous employees. So if they mention things like fast-paced environment or tight deadlines, and they mention these things over and over, and when you hear these words, this could mean that they have a culture of constant overwork of their employees. And when there's this type of culture or this type of work environment, people don't typically stay in these jobs too long, maybe a year or two at most, which is why that company is probably hiring. So there are things that you can ask just to kind of see how long the team has been together or how often have they had to fill this role. So what I recommend is just to ask about the project team. You can either ask about the team or you can just ask about previous project managers. And you can ask, have they been together for several years? If you ask this question and get a vague answer or they don't even really answer the question at all, then that should be a red flag to you that yes, they probably either do have high turnover or they just have burnout. All right, so the fourth red flag would be if the company doesn't even invest in tools, training, or development. Most successful projects require the use of good tools. And when I say tools, I'm talking about things like Asana, Trello, Jira, or even Microsoft Project. Now, the right tool will depend on the job and the type of project that you're going to manage, but essentially these tools help your project to run a lot smoother. So if a company hesitates when you ask them about the tools that they use to manage their projects, or if they don't have any training resources or anything like that for their employees, then I would count this as a red flag. If you haven't experienced this already, then just know managing a project in Microsoft Excel is just not the most optimal way to do things. And the reason being is that it can be pretty cumbersome. I know a lot of larger organizations do rely on Microsoft Excel, but it's not my preferred option when it comes to managing projects. I believe that every project manager needs access to the right tools to manage their projects. So if a company doesn't want to invest in the right tools or even development of their employees, then that tells me that the company either doesn't really care about quality and they definitely don't support their employees. Red flag number 5 is if there's ambiguity around project funding or even stakeholder support. Let's say you ask about budgets or you ask about executive support during your project management interview. If you're given a vague response or if the response isn't even really clear, then I would take that as a huge red flag. If a project lacks proper funding or it's difficult to even get the key stakeholders engaged, then it's going to be very difficult for you as the project manager coming in to keep projects organized or even on track. I once coached a project manager who was excited to take on a new job, only to find out that the projects that she was given was very difficult for her to even manage or to even get going. She quickly realized that the projects had little to no funding, and it was so hard to even get the stakeholders to respond to simple requests that she was sending out to them. She ended up spending more time trying to get approvals than just managing the project itself. And if you haven't experienced this or been in this type of situation, just know that this can be extremely frustrating. So if the company can't give you specifics when it comes to this, then I would take this as a major red flag. All right, so now that we've gone over what I consider to be red flags, let's talk about how you can spot them. If you have my project management interview prep kit, then you know the common interview questions that you're going to be asked for any type of project management job role. But here are 3 key questions that I recommend that you ask during the interview just to see if you can spot any red flags. One question that you can ask them is what project management tools do they use and how do they integrate those tools into their projects? This will give you some insight into the organization and their commitment to supporting their project managers. If they can't even name any tools that they use, then I would just take this as a red flag that they're probably not organized. The second question is more of a 2-part question, but I would recommend that you ask them, how long has the project team been working together? And then I would also ask them, so how do you support work-life balance? And the reason why I recommend this question is because this is going to help you to understand the company's culture and if there's any level of burnout going on. Now, if they answer this question and it's vague or it's just unclear, then just know that there's probably a culture of burnout or just high turnover. So then the third question that I recommend is to ask them, how do they ensure that the projects have proper funding and executive support? Now, if this is a good company, they're going to confidently talk about their approach to getting stakeholder buy-in or even just budget allocation and what that process looks like. Now, if they give you vague answers or they can't really answer this question clearly, then just know that they may struggle with either getting funding or support for their projects, and that could be extremely frustrating. If you do end up noticing red flags, right, but you still decide to move forward with a job if they do offer you the position, there's no judgment here, right? Because at the end of the day, this job market is really tough. But it's just more important that you're at least aware of and know what you're getting yourself into more than anything. If you do end up noticing some major red flags, make sure that you take this into consideration before accepting any job opportunities. Just remember, interviews are not just your opportunity to impress hiring managers. This is your opportunity to also make sure that that employer is the right fit for you. And like I said, if you spot any of these red flags, just really take them into consideration, but trust your instincts. I'm also curious to know if anyone watching this video has ever been in a situation where they've taken on some type of project management role and it's ended up being a nightmare. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever had a nightmare situation with a job that you thought was going to be a great opportunity and then quickly realized that it was just pure chaos. I would love to hear your stories in the comments. Now, if you do have the opportunity to walk away, or you can afford to walk away from a job because you know it's not going to be the best fit for you, then do so. Sometimes walking away can just be the best decision for your career at that time. That's all for this video. Let me know in the comments below any red flag stories that you have with employers. And then also just make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe. And then I will see you guys in the next video.